Ladies and gentlemen, listen to me carefully. Why is it that the ones carrying the most light are born into the darkest rooms? It's a question that echoes in the hearts of many. Those who feel like strangers in their own bloodlines, who look around the table at family gatherings and silently wonder, why am I so different? You were born into dysfunction, into chaos, into pain that you never created, yet somehow it has always surrounded you. And if you're not careful, you'll believe the lie that your environment is a reflection of your worth. But hear me, you were not placed in that family to conform to it. You were placed there to transform it. See, purpose never begins in comfort. It is forged in fire. Greatness never emerges from easy places. It is born in pressure, isolation, and contradiction. That toxic family, that wasn't a mistake. That was strategy. Heaven doesn't waste assignments. You were sent there as a seed, and seeds don't grow on marble floors. They grow underground, in dirt, where nobody sees them. You've been asking why me, but purpose asks, why not you? There is always a deliverer born into the house that needs deliverance. There is always a light born into the darkness that refuses to go away. And maybe, just maybe, you are that light. Toxic environments are not punishments, they are platforms. They are not where you end, they are where you begin. When you understand that your whole perception of your family, your upbringing, your trauma, it shifts. Because we often ask the wrong questions. We ask, God, why did you allow me to grow up like this? Instead of asking, what did you put in me that required this environment to activate? Look throughout Scripture and you'll notice a divine pattern. Every person chosen by God for something great was first placed in an environment that didn't reflect who they were, but rather what they were called to change. Moses was born into a nation that was enslaved, and then into a house that wanted him dead. He was raised in Pharaoh's palace, trained by the very system God would use him to dismantle. Joseph had a dream, but the road to his destiny was betrayal, pits, and prison, toxic, unfair, suffocating, yet none of it disqualified him. Every part of it was preparation. You can't manage a nation if you haven't first learned to manage rejection. You can't feed a generation if you've never been starved of love. Sometimes the famine in your childhood is the reason you'll have compassion in your calling. See, when God places greatness inside someone, he does not raise them in comfort. He raises them in contradiction. And the contradiction sharpens the calling. You were trained by what tried to destroy you. The dysfunction didn't break you. It built you. You didn't just survive a toxic family, you were forged in it. Think about it. Where does an eagle learn to fly? Not on the ground. It's pushed from the nest. It's dropped from heights. It learns in midair. And some of you are still waiting for your family to be your support system when they were never meant to be. They were the nest. But you've outgrown that nest. That rejection you feel, that's not failure. That's a signal that it's time to fly. God never meant for you to stay in that environment. But he allowed you to start there because the fire that refined you needed the heat of that dysfunction. So you say, but it was toxic. Yes, it was. But so is the soil where seeds die before they grow. So is the furnace where gold is purified. So is the pressure that turns coal into diamonds. You are not the product of your pain. You are the proof that purpose can survive in it. Real life, look around. The strongest voices, The clearest leaders, the most powerful healers, they are not people who were pampered. They are people who had to fight to find their voice, to protect their peace, to keep their minds intact when everything around them screamed otherwise. You didn't learn wisdom from being taught. You learned it from having to discern who to trust. You didn't learn strength from applause. You learned it when nobody clapped for you, and you kept showing up anyway. Could it be that your toxic family was not your curse, but your classroom? Could it be that the very things that made you cry are now the things that give your voice power and authority? Could it be that your empathy was born in your own wounds? That your leadership is the fruit of your loneliness? God never wastes pain. He recycles it. He turns betrayal into strategy, isolation into intimacy with him, dysfunction into discernment. That environment was your training ground. Because what's ahead of you requires more than talent. It requires character, resilience, and clarity. And you don't get that in easy places. You were trained by what you survived. Being different in your family is not a flaw, it's a clue. It's a sign that something on the inside of you was never meant to fit where you were first planted. You feel it. You've always felt it. The conversations around you never stirred your spirit. The values, the mindset, the cycles, they felt foreign to you even as a child. You were in the house, but you never fully belonged to its rhythm. And that tension, that wasn't rejection. That was recognition. Heaven recognized that what was placed inside you could not be buried in sameness. You were designed to disrupt, not to blend in. Look at Joseph. He had a dream that didn't match his environment. He saw destiny. While his brothers saw competition, he saw purpose, while his family saw pride. His difference was not embraced, it was hated. Not because he was wrong, but because he revealed what they refused to confront. Sometimes your presence becomes offensive to people who are comfortable in dysfunction. Your clarity threatens their confusion. Your hunger for more exposes their acceptance of less. So the dreamer ends up in a pit, not because he failed, but because he stood out. And you might wonder, why would God allow that? Because pits build perspective. Because pits strip away the need for validation. Because purpose must be tested in rejection before it can be trusted in elevation. You were never meant to mirror the people around you. You were born to break the mold. What if the rejection you feel from your own family is the platform that protects your difference? What if it's their inability to understand you that forces you to understand God? It was in the place of being misunderstood that many chosen ones learned intimacy with their Creator. When your voice is ignored in your house, you start listening more clearly to the voice of heaven. When your gifts are unrecognized at home, God begins to reveal them in the secret place. That isolation is often the breeding ground of revelation. David's own father didn't even call him in when the prophet came to anoint a king. Think about that. His own blood didn't believe in him. They didn't see the king. But God said, man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. Your calling is not determined by who validates you. It's determined by who created you. And God will often hide kings in shepherd's clothing until the right moment. So if you've been overlooked, it's not because you lack value. It may be because your presence would interrupt their plans. Your difference is divine. It's not arrogance, it's assignment. That hunger you have, that urge to go further, to question, to grow, to break out of the mold, that's not rebellion, it's revelation. You're seeing something they can't see. You're hearing something they've stopped listening for. And that doesn't make you better, it makes you responsible. Real talk. Being different is lonely. It's painful when your family can't relate to you, when your dreams feel like threats, when your standards make others feel judged. But let me ask you, would you rather be accepted in comfort or aligned with your calling? Would you rather fit in or be faithful? You were not born to repeat generational habits. You were born to rewrite them. And that begins with being uncomfortable, being misunderstood, being questioned. But don't let that pull you down. Let it push you into purpose. Because when God separates you, He sanctifies you. When He isolates you, He prepares you. You're not crazy. You're not confused. You're chosen. So stop apologizing for what sets you apart. Pain is never random. It is the soil where purpose takes root. But the problem is, we've been trained to run from pain, to numb it, to resent it, never realizing that pain often carries the blueprint for the very thing we were born to do. When you understand this, you stop asking God to take it away and start asking Him what it came to teach you. Because pain is a teacher, and every chosen one becomes fluent in its language before they walk fully in their assignment. Purpose is not born in the palace. It's born in the prison, the pit, the wilderness, the dry places. Jesus Himself didn't begin His public ministry until after 40 days in the wilderness, facing hunger, loneliness, and temptation. Why would the Son of God have to go through that? Because divine purpose must be tested. What hasn't been tested can't be trusted. If Jesus had to walk through pain before stepping into power, why do we believe our paths will be any different? Some of the greatest callings are wrapped in the deepest wounds. And many times, the very area where you are most broken is the area where you will bring the most healing. That's why the enemy attacked you there. That's why your family failed you there. That's why you cried in secret, asking God, why would you let this happen to me? But let me ask you, what if the pain was the path? What if the heartbreak, the abuse, the rejection weren't the end of your story, but the place where your assignment was born? Moses killed a man and ran into the wilderness, hiding in shame. But it was in that wilderness, while tending sheep in isolation, that he heard the voice of God. Not in the crowd, not in Pharaoh's palace, but in the dry, forgotten place. Some of you are in that wilderness right now, alone, misunderstood, feeling like your story is over. But I need you to understand, the wilderness is not the end. It's the training ground. That bush doesn't burn until the pain has done its work. Look at your own life. How many times has your pain taught you what comfort never could? You didn't learn to set boundaries when everything was peaceful. You learned when you were being drained. You didn't develop empathy when everyone loved you. You found it when you were overlooked, discarded, forgotten. Your capacity to lead was not shaped by applause. It was forged in silence, in long nights, in betrayal. The very things you thought disqualified you are the things God is using to prepare you. Isn't that how He works? He takes the foolish things to confound the wise. He takes the weak things to shame the strong. He chooses the broken to carry the blessing. And you, yes, you, are being shaped right now, not in spite of your pain, but through it. Real purpose doesn't emerge in moments of glory. It emerges when you've been stripped of everything and still choose to show up. Still choose to forgive, still choose to grow. That kind of purpose is unshakable because it's not built on external validation. It's built on internal transformation. You might still carry the scar, but scars are evidence that you survived. They are proof that the wound didn't win. So instead of hiding them, maybe it's time to ask God how He wants to use them. Because what if your story is the roadmap someone else needs? What if the thing that nearly broke you is the key that unlocks healing for a generation. Don't despise your pain. It carried something precious. You are the answer born into the problem. That's not just a poetic idea. It's a divine truth. God never sends a solution without first identifying the need. He sees dysfunction, decay, generational bondage, and he responds by sending someone, not an angel, not a miracle, a person, a child, a voice, a presence. And often that presence doesn't come from outside the house, it comes from within it. Right in the middle of the very thing that seems broken, God plants the answer in seed form. That's you. You keep asking, why was I born into this mess? But maybe the better question is, what in me was sent to change this? Because God doesn't react, he orchestrates. When Pharaoh's system was crushing an entire generation, Moses was born. When Israel was oppressed, Gideon was called. When the world was trapped in sin, Jesus came through a manger. Not in a throne room, but into simplicity and vulnerability. Every answer begins small, quiet, unassuming, but make no mistake. It is intentional. It is strategic. It is heaven's response to earth's cry. You were born into that toxic family, not to absorb its patterns, but to interrupt them. You were born into that cycle, not to repeat it, but to end it. That means you'll feel the tension. You'll see what others ignore. You'll ask questions nobody else is asking, and they might mock you for it. They might say you're overthinking, being rebellious, being too spiritual. But they don't understand. You're carrying a different frequency. You were born with an assignment, and that assignment requires awareness. Think about Nehemiah. He was a cupbearer, a servant, but he heard the news that the walls of Jerusalem were broken down. While others heard the same news and kept living, Nehemiah was disturbed. He wept, he fasted, he prayed. Why? Because the answer is always the one who feels what others ignore. If the brokenness in your bloodline bothers you, it's because you're called to fix it. If the dysfunction in your house disrupts your peace, it's because your presence is a divine interruption. Have you noticed that the people who seem most burdened for change are usually the ones closest to the problem? That's not a coincidence, it's a calling. Esther was born in a time of national threat, but placed in a royal position, not for comfort, but for confrontation. Who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? That's what Mordecai said to her, and maybe that's what heaven is whispering to you. What if your insight is not random? What if your voice is not extra? What if your very existence is the answer your family didn't know it needed? You weren't sent to mirror them. You were sent to reflect the image of God in a place that forgot it. That means your life will require courage. It means you will often walk alone before others follow. It means you will have to speak when silence is more comfortable. But when God sends an answer, he doesn't ask for popularity, he asks for obedience. The real life examples are everywhere. The first person in a family to go to therapy, the first to graduate college, the first to refuse abuse, the first to pursue purpose, not just survival. These are not coincidences. These are assignments in action. You are the answer, not just for yourself, but for those who will come after you, for those who will walk the roads you paved through your yes. So the next time you feel out of place, misunderstood, burdened by problems no one else seems to see, remember this. You were not born into the problem by accident. You were born into it as the beginning of God's answer. Heaven plants seeds where transformation is needed most. When God looks at the earth and sees bondage, he doesn't send noise, he sends a seed. A seed carries potential, promise, and process. It does not arrive in glory, it arrives in humility. It is small, it is hidden, it is buried. And often, that's exactly how the chosen ones feel in their own families. Buried, not celebrated, unseen, not understood. But you are not buried to be forgotten. You are planted to grow. You see, we expect transformation to come with power, with visibility, with recognition. But God's strategy is different. His pattern has always been to plant purpose in unlikely places. Jesus said, unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it produces much grain. That is the mystery of how heaven works. Death precedes multiplication. Hiding precedes unveiling. The seed must first endure darkness before it ever breaks through the surface. You were planted in that toxic family, not because you were weak, but because you carried what they lacked. And like a seed, everything inside of you, vision, purpose, clarity, healing, was encoded by heaven long before your environment tried to tell you who you are. The soil might be rough, the surroundings might be dysfunctional, but what's in the soil does not define the seed. The seed defines the future of the soil. You were sent there to change the temperature of the room. You were sent to shift atmospheres, to introduce a new way of thinking, a new way of living, a new legacy. And like every seed, you have to push through pressure to rise. You grow in silence. You mature underground. No spotlight, no applause, just obedience, just roots, digging deep where no one can see. God hides his best work until it's ready. Think about Jesus. The Savior of the world was planted in a manger, raised in a town so obscure that Nathanael said, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Yet, heaven had chosen that very location to begin the transformation of the world. Why? Because God is not intimidated by small, broken, or toxic places. In fact, he chooses them on purpose so no man can boast. And all glory returns to him. Have you ever considered that your placement was intentional? That your family with all its flaws and fractures was the exact ground needed for your roots to grow deep? God doesn't plant seeds in perfect gardens. He plants them in needy fields. You were sent into dysfunction to model restoration. You were planted in chaos to release peace. You were not placed there by accident. You were assigned there by design. And like all seeds, you may feel isolated, misunderstood, overlooked. But seeds don't need attention to become trees. They need time, they need pressure, and most of all, they need to stay planted until the season of emergence comes. Some of us are trying to escape the soil before the work is finished, but don't rush it. Let the process build you. Let the hidden seasons prepare you, because when you finally break through the surface, what comes out of you will not just bless your family, it will bless nations. So don't curse the dirt, don't resent the environment, because God only plants seeds in places he plans to transform. So if you've ever wondered why you were born into dysfunction, into pain, into patterns that felt like prisons, know this: it was never a mistake. You were not abandoned by heaven, you were assigned by it. Your difference is divine, your pain has a purpose, your presence is the answer, and your life is the seed. You were chosen not just to survive that environment, but to shift it, to bring light into the darkness, healing into the brokenness, and a new legacy where the old one failed. You are not who they said you were. You are who God says you are. And you are becoming everything your family, your generation, and your destiny desperately need. Thank you for your heart, your attention, and your courage to confront what most ignore. May you walk boldly in your calling, fully aware of who you are and why you were sent. Good luck on your journey, and never forget, the assignment is greater than the environment. Thank you.